Yeah, the Dream was my favorite because personal reasons. And the reason was he was a guy that I couldn't break.
He was so consistent and he was so remarkably good. And it's hard to believe that a player could play that well under that kind of pressure, playing against the MVP of the league, and just made you just kind of look at him in awe.
I am 57 years old. I was there. Press credential, courtside access, post-game hallways in arenas across the Western Conference for over 30 years. I watched Magic. I watched Bird. I watched Robinson. I watched them all. But I was in San Antonio in 1995 when the NBA handed David Robinson the most valuable player trophy before the playoffs started. And what happened next is something I have never been able to stop thinking about. Not the basketball, not the statistics. What I watched happened to a man's confidence in real time. What Hakeem Olajuwon did to the league's best player in the span of one playoff series. Nobody has told this story the way it actually happened. Until right now. Stay with me, because what I saw in that Western Conference Finals, what players told me in quiet moments afterward, explains everything about why the name Hakeem Olajuwon deserves to be spoken differently than it currently is. David Robinson won the 1995 MVP award. Legitimately. The man averaged over 27 points and 10 rebounds that season. He was the finest specimen of athleticism the center position had ever produced. 7 feet 1 inch. Built like a military installation. Fast enough to guard small forwards. Strong enough to move anyone he wanted off the block. The league handed him that trophy before the playoffs began, before a single elimination game had been played. Someone in that building said it out loud, and I heard it standing near the tunnel. Shouldn't ever give that award out before the series starts. Not when Hakeem Olajuwon is still playing. Nobody listened. The ceremony happened. Robinson smiled. The trophy was real. Then, San Antonio met Houston. A man named Gerald had covered the Spurs beat for 9 years, was sitting 2 rows behind me during Game 6. Robinson was guarding Hakeem on the left block in the third quarter. Gerald leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and did not move for 4 straight possessions. After the 4th one, he sat back and said to nobody in particular, "What is David supposed to do with that?" That was the right question. Nobody in that arena had an answer. Here is what people say about Hakeem Olajuwon. They say he had great footwork. They say the dream shake was a beautiful move. They say he was a good player on a good team. Here is what actually happened. Robinson finished Game 6 of that series with 7 points in the second half. The league's most valuable player. 7 points in a half while playing for his season. Hakeem did not trick him once. He did not get lucky once. He executed the same sequence of moves over and over. Moves Robinson had studied on film for weeks, and Robinson could not stop a single one of them. After the series ended, Robinson said it himself. I was pretty challenged. Hakeem was playing really, really well. He won. That is what David Robinson said. David Robinson, one of the finest players this game ever produced, described losing to Hakeem Olajuwon in those words. Pretty challenged. That is the most controlled version of what I watched happen in that building. What I actually watched was a man being dismantled, possession by possession, by someone operating on a completely different level of basketball intelligence. The dream shake was not a move. People who describe it as a move do not understand what they are watching. It was a system, a language. Hakeem would catch the ball on the block and begin reading the defender's weight distribution before he made a single motion. He already knew where you were going to be when the move finished before you knew you were going to be there. Then he sent your body in one direction with a shoulder fake, a head fake, a pump fake, and by the time your feet left the floor or your weight shifted, he was already somewhere else, finishing in a completely different location. Sam Cassell described the entire offensive game plan from those championship years in one sentence. We dropped the ball inside to Hakeem. If they did not double him, it was a basket. If they doubled, he kicked it out for a three. And sometimes he scored over the double team. That was the entire system. One sentence, one man. Robert Horry played with Tim Duncan. Robert Horry played with Shaquille O'Neal. Robert Horry has 7 championship rings across multiple franchises and played alongside the greatest players of 2 different decades. When someone asked him to name the best big man he ever shared a floor with, he did not hesitate. Dream number 1 by far. Shaquille O'Neal said something that should end the conversation permanently. When asked to name who he would take in his prime at center in the entire decade of the 1990s, he said Hakeem Olajuwon. Then he explained why. He was the only guy I could not intimidate. Shaquille O'Neal could not intimidate Hakeem Olajuwon. The man who spent an entire decade terrorizing every center in the league, who physically overwhelmed Patrick Ewing and David Robinson and every other big man he encountered, said Hakeem was the only one who was simply unaffected by his presence. In the 1995 finals, Hakeem averaged 33 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 assists per game against Shaq's Orlando Magic. Houston swept the series in 4 games. Think about what that means. The most physically dominant player the center position has ever seen, in his second NBA season, in his absolute prime, swept in 4 games. By one man. Michael Jordan never faced the Houston Rockets in the finals. Both championship years, Jordan was not there. When Rudy Tomjanovich was asked about this later, he revealed what Jordan had said privately. Jordan gave those Rockets great respect. Jordan said they were the team that gave the Bulls the most trouble. Jordan said he did not believe they had the personnel to contain Hakeem. Michael Jordan said that. Michael Jordan, who spent his career believing he could defeat anyone with the right preparation, said he did not know how to stop Hakeem Olajuwon. The 1994 Finals, New York Knicks. Patrick Ewing averaged over 24 points during that regular season and 23 points through the playoffs. In 7 games against Hakeem, he shot 36% from the field and averaged under 19 points. Hakeem blocked 4 shots per game in that series. In the final seconds of Game 6, with the championship on the line, Ewing's teammate John Starks rose for a three that would have changed everything. Hakeem blocked it. Game 7. Hakeem finished with 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 assists. Championship. This was a man who had never played organized basketball until he was 15 years old, who grew up in Nigeria playing soccer and handball, who arrived at the University of Houston in 1980 having never worn real basketball shoes, who worked with Moses Malone in the off-season to rebuild his game from scratch, who developed every move, every counter, every piece of that dream shake through obsessive repetition across years of practice that nobody saw. Kenny Smith told a story about their first preseason together in Houston. Hakeem was barely moving. Games were blowouts. The team looked lost. Kenny went to him and asked what was happening. Hakeem looked at him calmly and said, "They do not send these stat sheets to New York yet. The popcorn is not popping yet." He meant the league office. He meant nothing counts yet. He meant he would tell you exactly when it was time to watch. Opening night of that season, Hakeem had 38 points, 14 rebounds, 6 blocks, 7 assists, and 3 steals. The popcorn was ready. I am 57 years old. I was there in arenas across 30 years of professional basketball. I watched centers come through this league who were dominant, who were physical, who were skilled, who were celebrated in their time. I never watched anything like Hakeem Olajuwon. Bill Simmons wrote something once that I have thought about many times since. He said, "We will see the new Michael Jordan before we see the new Hakeem Olajuwon." Kobe Bryant went to him for footwork lessons. LeBron James went to him for footwork lessons. The players who defined the next 2 decades of this sport went back to Hakeem to learn things the game had moved past without fully understanding. He is the all-time leader in blocked shots in the history of this league. He is top 10 in scoring all time, and the only center in the top 10 in steals. He recorded a quadruple-double. He won back-to-back championships without an all-star teammate. He held David Robinson to 7 second-half points after Robinson won the MVP trophy. He was there when they gave that award to the wrong man. And then he went out and proved it without saying a single word. That is the dream.